It is 6:30. We'll call our special work session for May 2nd, 2022 to order. And we do have a quorum. Public forum. Individuals may address the City Council about items on the agenda or not included on the agenda. Speakers are required to state their name and address for the council record and limit the remarks to 3 minutes or less. Speakers are requested to frame their comments around items that fall within the authority of the City Council. Generally, the City Council will not take official action on the items discussed at this time, but may place the item on file, take the matter under advisement, refer the matter to staff or a committee for a future report, or direct the matter to be placed on an upcoming agenda. Would anyone like to speak? We'll move on. Bill discussion. Anyone have questions with the bills? Consent agenda item discussion. And we'll move into council information only items. Fee schedule, golf fees. John.
Thank you, Council President. Last week I had received a message about the fees at the golf course. When we restructured everything, we tried to simplify it as much as possible. So we eliminated, almost all of the fees and then brought back the household rate, the senior rate, then actually brought back into, or the household, the single, and then brought back in the senior rate. And then just last week got a request for college age. And in that consideration, when I committed that I would bring it to attention, we talked about it in agenda planning to bring it up. When I considered it, I see a justification for it on the basis that a typical college age student is probably going to have class up until in the month of May, come home, be here for the summer, probably go back to school around August. So if they're not going to school somewhere close by, it would be they're not going to be available for all the months of the golfing season. Granted, I know it's already May and barely any of the golfing season has happened, but that's not, this is kind of a not typical year for that. So, they really only have about half of the golfing months, not, they have the best months, but not all of them. And there are other courses in the area that do have that as a rate. So in the past, we haven't had many utilizing the college rate, but I think they had been getting a junior rate or something, because there was one in particular that was listed, and it's very possible that he was qualified for the junior rate last year and is now going to school, but the college rate. So this would, in the past, we've had it as 18 to 24, and then they need to show that they're an active student. So just something that I thought to brought up. So if there's any input or consideration to this, I'm open for discussion.
I think it'd be good to have it. Just from an example of an email I got, which is why we brought it up. There's 4 memberships. Mm-hmm. When you get their families involved with them.
I would agree.
Okay.
City Council County Commissioner meeting, May 23, 2022. John.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I had met Matt LeBlanc, the new county administrator, whenever he started. I think that was last fall, late summer. And talked to him, met with him for probably half an hour, and just talked to him about our relationship and way to communicate, and how we can kind of make sure that we're coordinating and finding ways that we can partner. And one of the items that came up both with his board in his discussions and just my discussion with him was that we've had in the past a couple times in my tenure, city council and county commissioner joint meeting just to talk about things that we have in common. So we discussed that and looked at a time when, we might be available. Their board meetings are during the day, which I know for a lot of you isn't conducive to a meeting time. So we tried to find a time that was not in line with our regular meetings, so we didn't have to rush from one to the other or try to, cut something off for discussion. So May 23rd seemed to be a viable option. We talked about it before we had the, what we're going to do tonight, recess to the later meeting. So I apologize that now in the month of May, we'll have four Mondays in which we would be calling you together to meet. But it worked for his board. So, if it really isn't something that works, we could, certainly try to reschedule and change that. But if not, they're open to hosting us at the county board in their board chambers, which you've all been a part of when we did the retreat last year with the council. The specifics would be anything else agenda related that we should talk about. I did mention to him that a couple critical elements that I think are important to discuss are broadband. We had been meeting with them shortly. I had the meeting on the day that Deb announced that she was resigning with about a discussion of broadband projects in the city and county. And then the other is, I know with their local option sales tax that they have for the transportation project. So they actually implemented that in 2018, the same year that we had the last ballot question. And the intent there, I believe, was to capture 9 or 10 million in total sales tax, and I'm pretty confident that the structure works the same as what our structure is that once you get to your declared number, then the tax would cease to be collected. So they've shared with us their actual collections, and they're actually projecting like they're gonna get to that number either maybe best case this year, but certainly next year. I would say in the first half of the year, for sure. So the ask would be, since your tax is subsiding, or whenever it does, would you have plans to re-up it? So I asked him that question directly and asked if maybe that could be a topic during our meeting, because it definitely has some merit and impact to both, our efforts to have that as a ballot question, and then if they would not be collecting the tax, then it would be really no change in impact to the residents of Little Falls or anybody spending money in the city of Little Falls, because the tax had been collected, would just be continued to collect it at the same rate versus just adding another 0.5% on top of it.
What time is the meeting gonna be?
5:30. If that's a challenge, we certainly could look at starting that a little later. I know, Brad, you likely have conflict with that start
I
time.
won't quite be done then, but I can try and leave early. It depends on the day. Otherwise, I'll just come after it started.
Thinking an hour, 2 hours?
Yeah, I would say an hour, depending on unless you have a lot of agenda items we want to bring up. I believe our last one, we were probably around that hour mark, hour and a half.
Works for me.
Any other things that we need to bring up?
Can we just email them to you if we?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that and share that and have them set that agenda.
Thank you for setting it up. Bank placement, public improvement 389, 2021 improvement projects. Sure who's? Lori.
Lori can start it. She's been working more closely on this one, but.
Okay, so we have Jason Murray here from David Drown's Associates Office, who they typically help us sell bonds for our street projects. So we completed our 2021 improvement projects. We have not sold bonds. I was kind of holding off till Hannah started so that she could partake in this, so kind of know what the process is and what we need to do. So in talking with Jason, we're looking at doing a bank placement this year rather than actually doing, going out and doing a negotiated sale. So I'll let Jason kind of explain that process, how it works, and the reasons behind that.
Mr. President, members of the council, as Lori indicated, we're going through a little bit different process this year, and I'm sure, I guess this morning when I woke up and was watching the news, listening to the news, the first thing they talked about was the Fed meeting this week and the potential of interest rate hikes coming. Well, knowing the timing of the sale and the potential moving through this bond, the best route to avoid this looming interest rate hike was to do a direct bank placement. Normally I'd be here tonight asking you to set sail on the process. We go through a 30 to 45 day process that we work with staff, get the rating done, we schedule a bid, and then I come back and I recommend a sale to you based on the bids that we had received. Well, knowing that the Fed's meeting this week and there's a potential rate interest hike, we're trying to avoid getting into the system and then having that rate hit us, which costs more dollars. So my recommendation to staff and council tonight was to move forward with this direct bank placement. Over the last couple of weeks, we've worked with an underwriter, R.W. Baird, to basically solicit on the city's behalf banks. And basically the solicitation was, what's your best interest rate? What are your call provisions? And we had Webster Bank come back at the low interest rate of about 3.3%. With a call rate of 2/1/2029, which the call rate allows you to refinance. And so that's very important when we look at these 15-year deals, the ability and the flexibility to refund the debt. You guys have refunded debt in the past and saved significant amount of dollars. So we're recommending tonight to the council to award this bond sale to Webster Bank and lock in at the 3.3%. If we wait, here's the based on our analysis from, again, we were looking at it about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago because of the timing of it. We have to get documents prepared. So the point in time that we looked at it, if we risk it and go through the competitive sale and we change routes and go that way, the potential is about another $120,000 in increased interest borrowing over the life of this debt. So my recommendation, council, for you tonight is going to be avoid the potential interest rate hike, lock in today, lock in on your rate, and move forward with this bond sale, $2,856,000.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call for tax increment financing public hearing, Community Asset Development Group. John.
Thank you, Council President, and thankfully we got Jason here as well. He can maybe talk a little bit through on this item too. Over the last week, I've had a number of conversations with the folks from the Community Asset Development Group. I want to state what they've stated. They're just all in for this project. They're very excited about the opportunities that come here. They have a lot of confidence in the project being successful in Little Falls. As with everything, interest rates going up, inflation costs going up, they've had experiences where the cost of this project from when we saw it back in early 2021 is now higher than where it was. So they've been working to restructure on their side with their investors the project so that they can make it move forward from the investor side. And what we've talked about is, what are some of those modifications that they'd be looking at. I believe our original proposal had a TIF plan that was pay-as-you-go for a little over, I think it was over $500,000, but over a 15-year period. What they came back was with some requests to modify that. The TIF plan in and of itself would need to go up. And what we're projecting right now, that we don't have exact numbers, but we're projecting their need to be on TIF dollars is around I want to say 835,000. They had some previous assumptions and that I didn't think would be palatable for us to do, or didn't think it would be appropriate for us to do, but removed those assumptions, talked to them about removing those assumptions, and then bringing their assumption and cost savings, bringing that back into the project, but paying for it through the TIF because it would be eligible. We felt that would be a proper way to go. They're also bringing to the table that they would agree to do a minimum valuation so that it ensure that we would be collecting enough for the TIF each year. So that would set the floor, making sure that the floor was substantial enough to pay the TIF costs, and then anything above and beyond that actually is just increased increment that we could be collecting. Just meeting with Jason today, discussing some of those elements. I think, the conclusion is that with the original TIF budget, or in the projected valuations that they discussed, there would be adequate ability to capture that and cover that in the project. I think the two things we talked about just before this meeting were, potentially how do we restructure that? So in order to capture the full amount, it would be increasing the time frame in which the TIF would need to be captured. So going from 15 years up to a 25-year period. And then just in terms of what we would need to structure for the project and ease for the city, discussing whether it could be a pay-as-you-go for the full term or an upfront, so that we would then be keeping all the proceeds from the TIF to either pay ourselves back if we have the funding to do that. So that's typically either done through a bond sale, or if we have enough internal funds and internal loan. So there's certainly some details to figure out. The critical element, what we talked about, and why I don't know if and Jason, I think this would be a part where you could comment, is whether or not we need to, by making these amendments, we need to do another public hearing. But what Community Asset Development Group would request is back to that non-binding letter of commitment, so that they could go to a bank and use that as their terms to make sure that all the financial pieces were in place and the bank could finance their portion of the project that they're projecting. So just back one quick, the project we originally looked at was like 6.9 million. They're up to probably estimating what's going to be an $8 million project. But with looming interest rate heights, the longer we wait and discuss this, the more that project cost is going to grow, because it's all going to go into interest. So, Jason, if you could comment to at least the public hearing necessity.
Sure. Mr. President, members of the council. I think if we go back to the original TIF plan, keep in mind that the TIF plan, when we drafted it back in 2021, this plan governs how the city uses increment. This is the guiding document that allows the city to collect increment. What if it pays for public infrastructure? What are those qualifying improvements? And the relationship, the requirements to continue as a housing TIF district. This is the document that guides you. As part of this, there is a budget in there that sets the maximum amount of increment over the 26 years of life. And so that budget set about 2.1 million of potential increment collections. So that's the framework that we have to work within. The document that John is talking about is that next step in the relationship, saying how long, how much, how do we treat the developer, and what are the developer's requirements to fulfill these tax increment guidelines. So from a budget standpoint, based on what we have today, I don't believe the council will have to go through an amendment which requires formal notification of the county and school district, public hearing. We don't believe we have to amend this TIF plan. I believe, based again on the information I have today, that this TIF plan is large enough. We created it large enough in the budget and the requirements to assist with this housing development that we shouldn't need to amend this. What John is talking about is the specific development agreement and that relationship with the developer that potentially needs to change. And there's no public hearing requirements as part of it. We just have to make sure that the agreement we commit to are well within the confines of this TIF plan.
Quiet group tonight.
It would
Do
certainly,
you want me to make something up?
I have, so the project is being, it was a 6.9, now they're estimating it at 8 million. It's still a pay-as-you-go, right?
That we could, so in meeting with them, their original discussion, and this is where I think, based on my conversation with Jason, I would need to go back and talk to them about what those terms could be. But they were looking at a pay-as-you-go for the first portion of the collection period and upfront for the rest of it, because it helped them to kind of maneuver the rate of return for the investor so that they could get that balanced out and recover, because in the early years, they're actually losing money in the first couple, and based on assumptions of when it fills and how much capacity it fills, and those aren't really negotiable terms. The bank's going to set that in their pro forma. So that gets them kind of up higher rates of return early, and then they can use the upfront piece to kind of slow things as it goes in later years. But what Jason and I discussed was either we pick one or the other. We don't try to, it's going to be a difficult plan to try to maneuver to do both. And that's where I have not talked to the guys from Community Asset Development Group about one side or the other.
So the pay-as-you-go then, what it was last time was they paid 100% of their levied taxes to the city kept 10%, 90% went back to them, correct?
Of the eligible tax dollars. So not everything, not all 100% of everything ends up back being rebated to them, but
Right, the school and county and all that, that's not included, just the city
city's
levy.
portion, yeah.
Just the city levied portion,
well,
right?
in the
county school.
city county school
District,
portion.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all, when we do TIF, we can capture that for all three jurisdictions. If it's going to a different format, which is called abatement, then each jurisdiction has control to approve that or not approve that. But when it's TIF, then the city can determine that for all three. But it's only on the improved value. So you're not taking away anything of what would be paid today. So say it would have been a taxable paying entity and it was making $10,000, $10,000 payment to each of them. They still get that $10,000. It's anything above and beyond that gets captured, and then that gets redistributed based on the TIF plan that is there. So if they don't have certain expenses that they could use in the TIF plan for those dollars, then they can't spend it for that.
Excuse me, Council President, there are some things that are outside of the TIF as well. So if you have like a market value referendum, which I think some of the schools' tax levy is based on a market value referendum, that is outside of the TIF. So they would still pay that market value referendum, but any other new taxes that are captured because of their development become a part of the TIF.
So that's, yeah, so just trying to simplify it. So that's why in TIF plans, it's actually not increasing the taxes paid to people because you're leaving it for what it was. In this circumstance, it's actually been non-taxable because it's been city-owned.
Right, but I guess what I'm getting at here is whatever that value is, 10% the city, or 10% of it's going to go back to those identities that are collecting that tax. 90% of it's going back to the holder of the TIF agreement, correct?
Mr. President,
Please do.
can I address that? Think of it this way, that 100% of the new value is captured in tax increments, and it's only the tax capacity associated levies. So as Lori indicated, the market referendums, they're on the outside of this. This is just the tax capacity. So what ends up happening is the city, county, and school district portion, once the building is built, that new value based on the building is captured in increment, and it's sent to the city through the payment of taxes and that. So of that increment, the potential of 10% is retained by the city for administrative purposes, and 90% is eligible to be reimbursed to the developer for those TIF qualifying expenses. So it's how much, how long will the city commit to reimbursing the developer or retaining the increment to help pay for those, whether it's an upfront or a pay-as-you-go. It's that 90% that we're talking about the use of incentivizing or assisting this development. The base, the county, city, and school district all get their taxes on the base, on the bare ground, once it goes private. Currently, right now, it's held in public. Once it goes to a private sale, the city, county, and school district should all get their associated taxes based on what the value of that land is. So once it goes private, yes, it'll be a little bit of a increase in tax capacity for those local units of government.
So you were talking, we're looking at a possible agreement for a minimum evaluation. What are they looking at as far as a minimum evaluation?
We would work to set the valuation to be whatever to cap that we would need to capture in the TIF to pay that I'm estimating right now $835,000. We don't have that firmly identified.
Mr. President, council members, we're waiting for the county. We've provided updated information through Lori to the county to say if this was built today based on these parameters, construction estimates, design and specs, what is that potential market value? So that'll help us run the numbers of how much increment it'll collect per year based on, we all know over the last year what's happened with the cost of labor, cost of materials, interest rates, everything seems to be going up. So ultimately, that county's value will help us determine, as I stated earlier, what we know today. We don't know the TIF plan. We don't believe the TIF plan will change. But if that value is higher than what we anticipated in the TIF plan has about $5 million of new market value built into it. If it comes back in at 5.5, 6 million, yes, then we're probably looking at an amendment of the TIF plan. But if it stays below that 5 million, we should be good from a standpoint of the capacity that we built into this TIF plan to govern the city's use of this tax increment over the next 26 years.
What's the levy rate for the city on rental property right now?
The tax levy for all properties is the same. The classification is set by the state, and that determines what your taxable market value is. So on rental property, it's 1.25% of your net of your market valuation. So so you multiply that by your total market valuation, your taxable market valuation, and then that determines your net tax capacity. Then you multiply that by the rate. So the rate's the same for everybody, but how much you get that percentage against your rate is different based on the classification of the property.
I would like to see us do what we need to make it work. We know from our housing study that we're short places to live. We know we've had recent business expansion and they're looking for businesses. North Free Stride's building. We have something coming up later this evening of another expansion. We're getting nothing on it now for property tax. It would have 49 more units with kids to support our school district. people buying groceries and going out to eat and buying stuff at the hardware store and the gas station, which all helps our community and those people, and we need the housing anyway. I would, if we need to 8 or whatever it is, in 25 years, we're getting nothing now. Let's
If
just
you-
get it started.
Yeah, if you also think of it like what we've been discussing around all the other kind of big projects that we have, like the community rec center. We do the community rec center because the local option sales tax gets approved. The local option sales tax generates the revenue. That's a new revenue coming in. That's a new opportunity there to pay for that investment. In this project, the TIF, the captured increment value is the revenue that's generated. It's not saying, it's not putting it on the backs of anybody else, or it's not taking away from anybody else by increasing their taxes. It's only
On the north side of the church?
Yes,
I don't think that's a city street.
it is a city street. It's between the church and that old Walmart building. There's about a half a block there that's city street.
So it's not on the north side, it's on the west side of the,
No, I think
No,
it's
it's
on the north
On the
side.
definitely
north
on the
side.
north side.
on
It's
the
on the
north
north side, yeah.
I thought that was their road, but
I thought it was too, I
No,
thought that was
there's a,
private.
well, here's Greg. He can answer. There's a stop sign there, so I'm assuming the city owns that street.
well, we have a stop sign in the
necessarily.
Coburn's parking lot, but that's,
Yeah, we do on that street.
In front of Faith Lutheran?
Yes.
Yeah, can we pave that, Greg?
Possibly. The process to paving it, we would have to have a petition. We'd have to have a petition, and then it'll go through the council just like our other ones, but
So the church would need to send in a petition?
yes, yep.
I will let them know.
any other messages?
Well, just back up a little bit on that. Raquel, we kind of talked about that before. We have, I want to choose my words carefully here, but they might just want to deal with it. If we end up extending 18th Street, which is in the plans, they're probably going to want their driveway in a completely different location anyway. That would be off of 18th Street.
We should have
Then
them talk to
the
Mr.
city
Kimmon.
would have to,
Well, if we do that road, we're gonna be
Right next to
paving
their
right in
parking
front
lot.
of their church, anyway.
well, can't we just put in 2 inches of blacktop temporarily until that happens? That may or may not happen. It could be 10 years down the road. In the meantime, they've got potholes and big holes full of mud, and it's a mess.
They could start by filling out a petition.
Okay, I will let them know. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, we will adjourn at 7:07 until our 7:30 meeting.